and hopefully everyone's back from their break. It's my pleasure to welcome our poetic opener this evening, Sharon Sunhye Lee. She resides in Victoria, British Columbia, where she enjoys writing poetry and essays, teaching, making ceramics, rollerblading, and exploring nature on Vancouver Island. Her writing is inspired by vivid memories, emotion-rich moments, and experiences of beauty, wonder, and concern. She is the author of 2 poetry and photography books entitled Detours, Adventures Abroad, and Reflections at Silver Lake. Sharon is currently working on a book of narrative essays and poems. And we look forward to that and to your reading. Welcome, Sharon.
Thanks so much, Leanne. So I'm just speaking from the traditional territory of the Lekwungen peoples. And I just want to say thank you to Leanne and Zoe for inviting me to come on and to share a few of my poems. So I feel really honored to do that tonight. So I just want to quickly show you a visual, the 2 books that Leanne had mentioned in the intro. So this is the first one. So this is the first book of poetry and photographs that I made. And this was a period of time in my life when I was living abroad as a teacher. And then the second book here, it's Reflections at Silver Lake. And I wrote this book of poems and photographs when I was living in Grassy Narrows First Nation in Northwestern Ontario back in 2019, well, 2017 to 2019. And so I'm working right now on a book of personal narrative essays and poems. And so my plan for that book is to include poems that I've written while living on Vancouver Island. So the poems that I'm going to share tonight are draft versions of poems that I'm considering to put into that book. So without further ado, I'll share with you my first poem. It's called Wandafuka Trail. So some of you might have hiked the Wandafuka Trail. I did so in the summer of 2020 with one of my best friends, Disha Garcha. So after I came back from that hike, I was inspired to write this poem. Wandafuka Trail. Our aim is clear. Practice persistence, be nourished by nature, walk together, us sisters birthed by other wombs. We hike, but soon slip on wet rock, deceived by substance, by something meant to carry us over muddy ground. In rapid descent, our fears are realized. Our undertaking has exceeded our capacity. Failure is imminent. We reprimand ourselves for cutting ties with comfort, for thinking our single backs can carry the weight of our needs. We reach for each other's hands, remind ourselves of warmth and solace and grit. Together, we carry on. Inhale, sweet pine, surging rivers, beach breezes. Together, we hush the wails of muddied skin and blistered egos. We remember our discomfort is chosen, unlike the pains of our Korean mothers and Indian grandmothers. We realize the privilege in the choices we make. Together, we do not let defeat seep. Do not let ragged breath deter us. We imagine camp, the down of sleeping bags that will hold us like pined after lovers. We feel comfort in learning how the present exists, its perpetual vanishing, discomfort diminishing with each step towards nightly stillness. Thank you. Okay, so poem number 2 that I'm going to be sharing is, I don't have a title for it yet, but I wrote this poem as a result of thinking over the past few years about more of my personal family history. and thinking about the experiences of my grandparents and my parents in the context of Japanese colonialism, the Korean War, post-war Korea, immigrant living, that kind of thing, and thinking about basically the trauma or pain that can be experienced by, say, a grandmother, which can trickle down to mother, which can trickle down to daughter. So essentially the concept of intergenerational trauma. So I shall share with you this poem. We learned early on the ache of missing someone, of missing the first person who is supposed to love you, of missing a parent turned absent through toxic nights to earn foreign dollars. We learned early on what a body without presence, without spirit, without vitality looks like, what unmet expectations feel like, what it does to internalize another's misery as one's own deficiency, of thinking the depression of another is the outcome of not having been enough. We learned early on to fear the switch, blasts of anger, resentment, pains of leaving home, aching bodies, residues of war. We learned early on to coil inwards, to keep secret the pains of our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, the trickling of trauma from generation to generation. But we have grown, sat in silence, research, reflection. We have learned the hurt and the history, the responsibility to free ourselves, to walk with lightened loads, to lessen the baggage that is passed down so that years from now, our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren can walk nimbly with spirit and vitality. Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Mm-hmm.
And then to end on a lighter note, I'm going to share with you a poem that's called Indy, which is the name of a dog that I've dog sat. Dog sitting is one of my hobbies. I absolutely love dogs. And this poem started off as like a little scene, sort of vignette written in prose. And then I thought, hey, it might be kind of fun to turn this into a poem. And I got that idea actually from a conversation with Anne. So thank you, Anne, for that. So yeah, it's called Indy. The fishy scent of Indy's gnawed bone decides it. It's time to get outside. Bored, I think of a new game, a role reversal. Get walked. Indy walks me to the apartment across the street, home to a medley of peeps, chain-smoking Chihuahua owners, blue Kool-Aid haired hippies, busty single moms, a young man with scoliosis. Indy walks me to the building side, to parking stalls of urine and gasoline, adds his scent, then walks me to the building's back, past kiddie pools and plastic cars, to a tall fence where he stops, unidentifiable objects scattered. His incessant food-seeking Labrador mouth grabs one. I grab his jaw, drop it. A purple plum kerplunks. I look up, a mother lode of purple gold. Daughter of a foraging queen, I squeal with glee, promptly pluck 6 plums, then tell myself, next time Indy shits in the house, I'll consider these payment for my carpet cleaning services. The end. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Oh, that's lovely.
You, Sharon. Wow. That was, yeah. Oh, so much fun, that last one. I feel like I need to get walked. I'm hoping to get a dog this spring, so that resonated with me, and I really appreciate, your other poems, just so brave, and thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Just really glad you could be with us here tonight and share your poems.
Thank you.
Great.
Excellent.
Okay, so next we are going to hear from our featured poet. I'd like to welcome Geoff Inverarity. Are you there, Geoff?
Yes, I am.
Okay, excellent. Well, Geoff is joining us tonight from Vancouver. He's produced and written award-winning short films, taught literature and creative writing at UBC, and has also won awards for his screenplays, poetry, and nonfiction prose. He is a frequent contributor to Geist and is the director of the Galiano Island Literary Festival. And I think you're going to be reading to us from your debut collection, Broken Things. Welcome, Geoff.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thank you for arranging all this, and thank you everybody for being present. And I'm coming to tonight from Vancouver, though normally I'm resident on Galiano Island, which is the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and particularly the Penellicut. And the Penellicut are much in our minds on Galiano at the moment, with the revelations that are coming out from the Cooper Island residential school. It's a very sobering story. Everybody's talking about the looming pointless catastrophe. How pointless it is, how much it looms, what a catastrophe it's going to be. We're stockpiling for the short term, the long term, we don't know. No matter how much you prepare, there's always something new looming, like the unexploded grief bomb we found buried deep out in back of the house. It's been there for decades. We figured a previous owner, but I'm not so sure. Besides, it's ours now. It's on some sort of timer. We have no idea. Thing is, it's going to blow sooner or later. Hard to say which would be worse. Someone else's grief bomb went off down the street last night. There were sirens, lights, and weeping. So there's that. We know about that. We'll take a casserole or something, as one does. I have to admit, I resent all this looming. Try not to, but there it is. Life's a bomb on a timer. My mother kept a clean house even after she died suddenly from a massive stroke. Luckily for my father, left alone in the house to take care of himself, spare bedding was neatly folded, ironed, and stacked in the linen cupboard beside the water heater. Each sheet, pillowcase, or blanket individually wrapped in a heavy plastic bag, sealed with sticky tape and bearing, my mother's haunting touch of genius, a self-adhesive label pointing out the date each thing had last been washed. Thus, when I arrived, bewildered, jet-lagged, and grief-struck, I was able to find exactly the right combination of thoughtfully itemized bedding, while my father could sit, red-eyed and weepy, beside her empty chair in the living room. I took the dust sheets off the furniture in the bedroom I had used far less often than she would have liked, and made up my bed with a matched set of fresh sheets, crisp pillowcases, and clean blankets. She was still there then, only a few days dead, hovering in the convergence of plastic, sticky tape, and labels, directing the show, organizing us. During her life, the habit became something of a compulsion. She threw away nothing that could ever be used again for anything, no matter how inconvenient, ugly, or unsuitable. Empty margarine tubs would reappear under plant pots to catch the water. The lids of yogurt containers or coffee tins would make triumphant comebacks, gaily transformed into handy drink coasters by the simple application of tartan mac tack. Any wool left over from the sweaters and scarves under perpetual construction was immediately knitted into small squares, the squares sewn into blankets, and the blankets wrapped in plastic bags, dated, labeled, and sent to the children in Africa. And she was still there 7 years later when I took another of those dreadful transatlantic flights. This time my father was in intensive care, sporting a colostomy bag, heavily sedated, half-gutted, and greatly reduced in himself. I found myself alone, I thought, in my father's empty house, except my mother was there again, a phantom in the linen cupboard, asserted by her neat and rounded girls' boarding school script. She was still the ghost in the machine of household tasks, those small renewals and reorderings that sustain us, leave us free for the vast and dirty business of living. The bedding was ready, last washed well over 7 years before, but still fresh and well wrapped. As each seal was broken, my mother disintegrated a little further. My niece, who had picked me up at the airport, remarked on each label in baffled awe of so dedicated an engagement with entropy. All those hours spent on keeping a clean house, all those thousands of hours spent folding and ironing, as if the forces of disorder were ever massed outdoors, pacing and snarling in the raspberry canes, waiting for an unfinished task, for the defenses to come down. She kept those spectres of anarchy away as best she could, their reality scarred into her being by the stalking horror of having lived in the midst of global warfare. When your experience of life includes such terrors, then you had better know where your life jacket is, you had better be prepared, you had better have the blankets ready, be on guard for the cataclysm, the earthquake, the explosion, the flood or famine, the sound of the air raid sirens, the thunder of invisible bombers, cancer, a stroke, or perhaps even the discovery that there is another woman in your husband's life. She was real, that other woman, and I have learned that she was there for over 20 years, her solid shadow falling across the needlework, no matter how big a bulb my mother put into the standard lamp above my father's empty chair. Now I am drawn back in time to watch my mother, alone in the house night after night, and I am forced to watch her turning up the radio to cover the sound of nails tapping at the window. I am beside her as she spends her days alone, wiping, dusting, scrubbing, and polishing. I see her as she finds a plastic bag, one of the ones she never threw away, and wraps up the coffee pot or glassware or the napkin ring, writes out the label, seals the bag, and packs it away. Then day after day, she freezes and dates the leftovers from all those uneaten dinners because my father had been late home from work. Beef stew, 03, 02, 87, shepherd's pie, 25, 10, 88. As well as the peas, raspberries, and broad beans gathered from the garden in the last summer of her life. Then she can reline all the drawers and the cupboards, paper, thumbtacks, and a dated label, take the leftover fabric from the curtain she just gathered and sew it into a matching bedspread, make new lampshades out of pressed flowers and clear plastic, even reupholster the dining room chairs until everything is marked, accounted for, and controlled. I hover, invisible by her side, because we have reached the point where all there is left to do is to find one bag big enough to cover the whole house and all the rest of us in it and write out a label that says, like all the other labels, this is my house, these are my children, and this is my husband. I will never leave. I am like her now, writing this, keeping disorder at bay in my own way, telling a story, putting a little more design into the chaos of my own experience. I am still breaking the seals today on a package of my schoolwork, on a christening present from a long-dead godfather, a silver napkin ring engraved with my initials, cherished, wrapped in a small plastic bag, and lovingly labeled with the date of its last polish. Each seal broken is another breach with the past, but it is also another chance to remember her, touch what she touched, thank her for all her work. And as each seal is broken, I imagine another small release for her, because her work is almost finished. Soon, none of this will matter, and it's long time past the time for her to rest.
Tremendous.
I heard dogs mentioned earlier. It's a poem about a dog. It's a poem about the woman who talks to her dog at the beach. The woman who talks to her dog at the beach favors the Socratic method. Where's your stick? What do you think is going to happen if you keep chewing on that stick? Would you like a treat? Are you ready to go home now? Simple stuff. Answers, the stick is behind me. Soon it will all be gone. Yes, always a treat. No, obviously, home, never. But in private, later, the tricky existential questions fly. Who's a good dog? Are you a good dog? Who's a good dog then? The dog wrestles with the questions. I have done whatsoever you have asked of me. I sat when you required it, stayed despite my heart being wrenched with every step you took away from me. I confess, alone in exile, I have often howled despairing questions of my own. Will I never see you again? Are you ever coming home? Why have you forsaken me? I have dropped what you wanted dropped, searched out and picked up what was apparently lost, all the sticks you could not find, the balls you could not see. I have rolled over and plunged myself again and again into the rime-cold ocean at your behest. Yet still you ask the same question, who is a good dog? There are other questions, clearly, yes. Of course, I would like to go for a walk, and it would be most agreeable, a privilege and an honor to carry the squeaky toy with me in my mouth. But am I a good dog? Do you know the answer? Because I would appreciate some clarity. Who on this shoreline is a good dog? Are there better dogs than I? Please, I hope to have an answer before my coat mats. My legs stiffen, my breath reeks, and I am finally ready to go home at last. The woman who talks to her dog at the beach launches her questions into the air. Life is complicated and lonely. There is heartbreak in the future. People are difficult. There is great comfort in companionship, in the simple love of dogs.
That was great.
How is my time? I'm sorry, I meant to set a timer and I forgot.
Yeah, no worries, Geoff. You've got time to read a couple more, definitely. I'd love to hear them.
So you also mentioned intergenerational poems, and this is a poem about my late father-in-law. His name was Doug Randall. He was a jazz musician. That was his love. It was his greatest pleasure. He left school early, formed a jazz band, toured the prairies at the age of, I think, 18 years old. When he was, before he left school, he suffered from rheumatic fever. This is a poem about imagining what happened the first time he heard the music that he loved. So this was the night. He was just a skinny kid from Calgary, laid up in bed for the best part of a year and a half, in terrible pain, isolation, all the joints swollen, eyes too sore to read, hard to swallow, nausea, fever, no school for the duration, not that he missed it. It was wartime, and he was marooned, surrounded by the dark songs of the vicious prairie winter, moaning around the house. Until late one night, he's alone with a radio on beside his bed, scanning the ether, till something comes in from somewhere down in the States, maybe some freak of the atmosphere bouncing across the invisible border, off the northern lights perhaps, making him catch his breath, his heart race, hearing something he'd never heard before, wilder and kinder than the winter's music, something soaring, something lifting him up. Without warning, he is hurtling east, leaving the mountains behind him. He skims over the dead wheat fields, hard as a gravestone, a blur beneath him, the night streaming by, until suddenly there are skyscrapers up ahead. Crowded sidewalks, the streets filled with yellow cabs, neon glimmer, and steam from the grates, just like in all the photos, except in color now. Excuse me. He knows where he is, feels the deep grace note rumble of the subway beneath the magic city. Life, it was life like he'd never lived it, out there in the dull Canadian West. He swoops low, hurtling along the chasms between buildings, riding the beat, honing in on a trumpet, holding a single breath-defying note just for him. Excuse me. So he can follow the sound. He knows the way now. Come on in, kid. He's beckoned down some stairs to a basement club where these black guys are blasting after hours ice school hep fire, jamming up on the tiny stage, elbow to elbow, chops are flying. The whole place packed, steamy, all those wild hep cats in zoot suits, transformed, possessed, delirious. The shady wise guys with their dames rejoicing with whiskey and reefer, steaks and spaghetti. He feels the bass hold him steady before the fat guy on the piano showers him with notes like confetti, hooks him and the whole joint in, and reels them up so high they say goodbye to gravity, floating in a cool void where the saxophone shoots starbursts, cracks the night sky wide open, and everything blazes. Even the band can't believe what's happening. The drummer throws back his head, howls because he's hearing impossible music nobody has ever played before, creating the universe again and again. Too soon, the radio signal fades into static, the pain and the isolation grind back, and the snow piles up outside, except now the skinny kid's infected with something rare, something new, knows there's something he has to do, never mind the music teacher, to hell with Fur Elise, the pretty Mozart tinkles, the Beethoven bombast, the dumb high school drama. He's elected. Here is freedom, here is flight, here is life, shouting. Here is where the journey starts. He has to get back there to fill the void, drown out the static, lift himself up, lift us all up, make his own way, be the one, the many, the starlight maker, the joy bringer. That was the night he heard music from the future. That was the night Doug Randall heard jazz. And
Fabulous.
again, thank you so much for having me. I'll just finish with what is the epilogue of my book, All the Broken Things. Anvil Press, support Canadian publishing. It's called One Day. One day we will wake up clear-headed, refreshed after an excellent night's sleep, turn to face the day and find well-scrubbed pots, cutlery in the right drawers, and dishes in gleaming stacks on shelves. One day the gutters will be clean, the decks swept and stained, the grass green and short, plants watered, the garden weeded, the camping equipment aired, the matches and sleeping bags dry, the hole in the screen door patched. One day we will have caught up with the laundry. Now that we have all the right tools for the job, we can put them away for the last time. We have returned all our empties and disposed of our garbage in a responsible manner, balanced our checkbooks and paid every bill. In short, all the chores are finished. The last £5 are lost and the blood work came back negative. Our pets have had all their shots and our children, who visit often, are healthy. They are happy and successful in every area of their lives. We can't remember the source of a single argument, so we dropped all our grudges and found that all the bridges we burned had been rebuilt using sturdier construction materials. The car waits, shining, bodywork finally fixed, serviced on schedule, tires correctly inflated, fluids replete, ready for any journey. One day, all the broken things will be mended. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.